and basketball and baseball and football residue this week, but we all know we are less than 2 weeks out now on Old Hilltop and the running of the Preakness Stakes. Some would say that I'm always dreaming. Many would say this guy is always dreaming. He's dreaming of a better life back in the 1980s when we would go to Paul Simon concerts together and gather on Calvert Street with Bowie, Pimlico, and Timonium. He is Marty McGee of the Daily Racing Form, my lifer pal, and DRF McGee out on Twitter, who now has offspring going to Oak Stays and Kentucky Derbies based on what I see on his Twitter feed. And you had this one nailed all along in the mud on Saturday, right, Marty?
Not quite there, Nestor. Not quite. You left out Laurel, by the way. You said Timonium.
Laurel, as Charlie Ekman would say. Yeah, we did some time in Laurel as well. Man, all I can say is this, dude. You know how much I love the Derby. You know how crazy it was here last week with Adam Jones and Machado and me running around at the Caps games in Pittsburgh. I honestly didn't even remember there was a Derby until Friday when there was the Oaks. I think on Saturday I tuned in a little bit in the afternoon with my mom over some crab cakes and an ice-cold Bud Light at Costas Inn. And then the race started. Marty, I watched the race on my buddy Greg's mobile device in a parking lot on New York Avenue and 6th Street entering Game 5 of the Stanley Cup second round. And, you know, I knew Baffert didn't have a horse. I knew there were a lot of horses. I knew the weather wasn't good. But run me through what happened on Saturday, and quite frankly, for those of us going to go out and put a hat on next week, and what we can expect here next week.
Well, Always Dreaming was a dominant winner. He was the victor for Todd Pletcher and John Velazquez. They both had won the Derby once before, but not together. They are arguably the most successful trainer-jockey team in horse racing history, so it made for quite the scene among them and their many backers. He'll come to Always Dreaming will come to Baltimore as quite possibly an odds-on favorite in the Preakness. Although, if you remember 7 years ago, Nestor, when Todd won his only Derby with Super Sabre, he was a pretty solid favorite and was eighth behind Looking at Lucky. And the MO for Todd Pletcher is to not run horses back in 2 weeks. So this creates quite the dilemma, I think, for him and for gamblers trying to assess how this race is going to shape up. Now, the horse who was second at 33-1, Looking at Lee in the Derby, he's going to run back at Pimlico most likely. Battle of Midway, the third-place finisher, I'm pretty sure is not. Classic Empire, his status has been in doubt. He came out of the Derby with a couple of little dings. His eye got something thrown in it, and he had some superficial cuts on his legs. But if Classic Empire runs back at Pimlico, he most likely would be the second choice to Always Dreaming. As a matter of fact, Keith Fustel, who makes the line at Pimlico, he stays at my house every year for the Derby. He's been here the last 7 or 8 years. On Sunday night, I dropped him off at the Louisville airport to send him back to you. And he says definitely Classic Empire would be the second choice. So you've got roughly, 4, 5, 6 horses maybe out of the Derby who finished behind Always Dreaming come in. You've got a fairly serious contender by the name of Cloud Computing, trained by Chad Brown, who's pointing to the race. So they're looking tentatively early week post-Derby at about 10 horses for the Preakness Stakes, the 142nd running on May 20th.
How was the Derby this year just in general? I mean, does it feel like it's getting bigger, getting smaller, staying the same? And obviously when the weather kind of falls apart. I mean, we're all looking at Tom Brady's selfies now on Instagram. I mean, the celebrity side of this thing, they don't wait for the red carpet. They just do it themselves these days to figure out who's showing up and all of that. But it certainly looked to be a messy case over the weekend. And I've been down there in Louisville on weekends when storms blow up at 4:30 in the afternoon and everybody goes running for cover. Certainly all you needed to do was put the television on Saturday. I mean, I was out with my mom at probably 1 o'clock on Saturday. I looked up and, you know, it looked like it just looked like pudding out there. It looked like a mess.
Yeah, it was pretty messy. This is my 44th straight Derby, Nestor, and I
You're not even 44 years old, McGee. Come on, man.
Come on, dude. Yeah, 44.
44.
And the worst by far was 1989 when Easy Goer lost to Sunday Silence. This had to be in the top 5 in terms of complaints about how the weather could have been better. It was cold often. I mean, the sun did come out at a certain point on Saturday, but Friday and Saturday were just a mess, and it was, somewhat ironic that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday following the Derby were supposed to be great weather here in Louisville. But, it takes a lot to dampen the spirit of the folks who are actually there. And then I read somewhere that NBC, their ratings were either the best or the second best in the last 25 years. So horse racing is not dead, Nestor. And I think something of that had to do with poor weather all up and down a lot of places. And so people were just like, inside, what are we going to do? Oh, let's turn on the Kentucky Derby. So, but yeah, the NBC ratings were great. They had 158,000 people on Derby Day alone, 105 on Oaks Day. So it's still a great event, one of the iconic events in American sports.
Well, for me, it's my favorite event. We haven't been in a number of years, and my wife's illness. And by the way, every time I see a game in Cincinnati, a baseball game, the Orioles played there like first week of the year, like 2 weeks ago. There were like 3,500 friends and family sitting at the Great American Ballpark, and all I could think about was you and I eating those Coney Island dogs and drinking far too many adult beverages that night after swabbing people to save some lives. And so I always harken back to that, but I had as much fun on that night as any of the other 30 nights that I had at the ballpark. And I will say, as much as the Derby was sloppy in 1989, I've never had a sloppier Preakness than I did for Sunday Silence at Easy Goer. So and it was perfectly sunny that day, but you know how the Preakness goes. For you with the Derby this year, where's the star power in this? Because I remember Pletcher was one of those guys, as well as Velasquez, sort of stalking this race in those years when the Calvin Borrells and the Edgar Prados and Kent DeSermos were winning races. These are, two very, very storied guys, and as you said, they've become their own little group together, and they are the premier group now, Jockey and Trader in America. For them to win with a horse that goes out the front, and every other horse seemingly had some sort of a bad trip because all the rest of them were getting mud kicked in their face, this horse kind of came out unscathed, right? That's probably one of the reasons it's going to be such an odds-on favorite next week.
Yeah, he is going to be favored. I mean, it's arguable whether or not he's going to be able to run the same kind of race at Pimlico. Johnny, as you mentioned, he is the all-time leading earner in racing history with, I think it's more than $300 million in mount earnings. Pletcher, he's number one, and you put them together, and they're a pretty powerful team. Now, again, the recurring theme that fans are going to hear as this race approaches at Pimlico is, can a Pletcher horse turn back successfully on 2 weeks rest? Because the way that racing has gone in the last generation is kind of Bobby Frankel was one of those who kind of set the tone that the more time between races, the better. And nowadays,
wouldn't that be an obvious to everyone, every human being who's ever done anything 2 weeks apart or 3 weeks apart, right?
Well, there's a fitness thing where nothing's better than having a race to make a horse fit. So it's a fine line they straddle in terms of rest and fitness. And I think they've come, the equation they've got it down to is 4 or 5 weeks. So the 2 weeks, the Preakness and Derby for many, many years has been 2 weeks apart. And that's just not the way it's done anymore. But maintaining the tradition, and we've gone through this many times. I mean, what would you do? Back up the Preakness to Memorial Day weekend? It just wouldn't work. I mean, there's just so many things that are set. And then if you backed it up to the Belmont, what would you have at the 4th of July?
Well, I know there was a movement, in the last 10 years before American Pharoah and, when purses were going, when things were, much more on the decline than sort of stabilized, that was talked about every single year. And obviously, dude, given the politics here, given the racetrack you're going to find, once again, Old Hilltop when you come here, after leaving, Kentucky where they remodeled Churchill Downs 15 years ago now, and obviously, the Belmont is what it is. We're always worried about losing the race and where it's going. Is it going to Gulfstream, or are they going to rename the race? Are they going to reform all this thing? Some of that seems to have been stabilized a little bit, right, Marty?
It has, although they're pouring tens of millions of dollars into Laurel, and they're A, seeking the Breeders' Cup, and then B, if they have a viable Breeders' Cup at some point, they're going to say, hey, look, we can do this. We can handle the crowds. Why can't we move the Preakness over here? So I think that's going to be an ongoing issue for you.
Well, certainly for the city, but not for the state, and as long as it stays here to some degree. With the Preakness, you covered it here for many years at the Sun. You've been down in Kentucky. You went home, and you've been gone a couple of decades. Everyone says to me they really look forward to coming to Baltimore, that there's some sort of relaxed environment that happens here over the next 10, 12 days that you can't find in Kentucky, and you sort of can get lost in New York if the Yankees are going well and the Rangers are in the Stanley Cup final. All of that stuff that could be happening in New York, that Baltimore is still, for many of the horse people, their preferred destination on this path. But there's only one person now that can win actually one horse and a couple of people and connections that can win the Triple Crown. And now that we've seen it won a couple of years ago, I guess coming to Baltimore for the Preakness, if you can't win the Triple Crown, you're just coming as as a spoiler at that point, right?
Yeah, you are, but it's still one of the great races in America. And any owner or trainer or jockey would tell you, man, I would love to win the Preakness. Neither Pletcher nor Velasquez has ever won it, so they've got that added incentive. But a guy like Mark Casse, who trains Classic Empire, he's never won an American Classic, even though he's been a 9-time Sovereign Award winner up in Canada. And they would dearly love to win the Preakness with Classic Empire. So would a number of other people. Like you said, it's a great place to be. It's a great time of year. And it's just, it's a lot of fun and very fulfilling for a lot of people to be there in Baltimore on the third Saturday in May.
Let's talk about Pletcher a little bit and this horse and the trainers themselves, because the horses don't talk. Sometimes the jockeys don't speak English as well as you and I do at this point to get on a microphone and sort of work it like Vince McMahon. But, Pletcher's been one of those guys that was stalking this thing for a number of years before Super Saver and Calvin Borel. And obviously not having a Baffert around, the D. Wayne Lucases and sort of the old school guys that you've been around these barns with for the better part of 3 or 4 decades. Pletcher is a star into his own right, but there is something missing when Bob Baffert doesn't show up, right?
Yeah, this is the first time in quite a while that Bob has not had a Derby horse. He had a horse who arguably would have been the favorite, a horse named Mastery.
What a great name, by the way. That's a great horse name, Mastery.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, he easily won a major prep in Santa Anita in March, and then pulled up real bad out of the race. They saved his life. I don't know if his career's been saved or not, but Bob went ahead and won the Kentucky Oaks. Yawn. He just he went ahead and won the Oaks the day before, and really kind of stole the spotlight from some of the other favorites. A filly named Abel Tasman won at 9-1. And Bob said, yeah, I would have loved to have had a Derby horse. He's won 4 Derbies in the last 20 years from 27 starters. This is one of the few he didn't have a starter in there. And then he got on a plane real early Derby morning and went home and watched the race in California. But he will not have a Preakness starter either. He's not going to have any 3-year-old colt, I would imagine, in Derby, Preakness, or Belmont. And so, yes, I mean, he's arguably the greatest trainer we've had in terms of media attention and otherwise, and real things getting done in my career. So, there will be something a little bit missing in Baltimore for the Preakness without Bob Baffert.
He is Marty McGee. He is my lifer pal. He is at the Daily Racing Forum. He had a beautiful hat on Saturday on a rainy day, or bad track conditions. It wasn't a rainy day. It was kind of an ugly day down in Louisville, Kentucky. He'll be here in Baltimore next week. You can find him at DRF, that's Daily Racing Forum McGee, out on Twitter. While our people here are sober right now without hats and dresses, and we're more than a week out on this thing, Marty, some thoughts about some other horses. I mean, Preakness Day isn't just about the Preakness race. There are a lot of major stakes races going off here in Maryland. I know we've improved our purses. As you pointed out, they're improving Laurel, but we'll be out at Pimlico. Some other horses, some other jockeys, some other names maybe to be made aware of for folks out there who are going to be getting a form next Saturday.
Well, gosh, I mean, there's usually about a dozen other supporting stakes. Of course, on the Friday before, you had the Black-Eyed Susan for the 3-year-old fillies.
I got my pink picked out, by the way, for that.
It's really gotten big on all the day befores, all the eves. all the derbies and Preakness.
Racing's done a nice job with that, taking that Oaks model and stretching that out, right? I mean, certainly here in Maryland, there's nowhere I go on that Friday where I don't see people wearing pink. That's for sure.
Yeah, and even this year they had the Oaks jockeys wearing pink pants to heighten awareness of
If baseball players can wear pink bats, if Ray Lewis can wear pink socks and wristbands, why not pink pants on jockeys, right?
Yeah, just raising the awareness of it, which is great, as you said. But, you got the Black Eyed Susan and the Pimlico Special on Friday. You've got another, I think, 7 or 8 stakes on Preakness Day. And even if they're not involved in the Preakness itself, a lot of the top names, trainer and jockey-wise, show up at Pimlico on the 3rd Saturday in May.
Where's American Pharoah these days kind of hanging out, the real superstar, the secretariat of the era?
He's a Coolmore stud, just about maybe 10 miles from Keeneland. I believe that I'm kind of embarrassed. I don't know if he's a shuttle horse or not, meaning if he goes down to South America in the off-breeding season here or Australia. I forget what they're doing with him, but I know he's serviced a lot of mares. His first babies just hit the ground in March or April, and in a few years from now, we're just going to be inundated with all the American Pharoah babies on the racetracks of America.
Well, there's nothing that was better for racing than that, right? Like that coming along will be the thing that that changes everything moving forward, right, for the industry.
I mean, it was a huge boost. Baffert, as you mentioned, he was front and center in the whole deal. He's still kind of in la-la land, knowing that he was the first guy in 37 years to sweep the Triple Crown. And, my dad used to say, and you'll probably agree with this, in baseball, I like to get a lot of doubles and singles, and when you have a home run, it's kind of a rally killer. You got to start all over. And I think maybe this might have been the home run that kind of killed all the hopes and dreams, and the thing that everybody talked about was when can we get a Triple Crown? So, I wouldn't be surprised, nor would anybody, to see Always Dreaming win the Preakness and go forward 3 weeks hence to Belmont Park looking for another Triple Crown. But, it's just not going to be the same as it was back in 2015 when everybody was just dying to have one win it.
All these names like Nyquist last year in American Pharoah, California Chrome, I'll have another. All the Triple Crown possibilities of Big Brown and Smarty Jones and Funny Side. It's always a fun couple of weeks here, and I know for a lot of folks here, it's the only time of year they think about horse racing. But when you're thinking horse racing, make sure you're checking out the Daily Racing Forum and my pal Marty McGee, who will be in here looking for non-tourist crab cakes next week. And I know, Marty, you know the difference. So I hope to see you next week, and we take a selfie together. Maybe do a little alibi breakfast. All this is going to be predicated on the Caps and the Wizards and the Orioles and all that crap. But I hope to see you here at Old Hilltop next week, pal.
All right, buddy. Sure appreciate you having me.
He is our lifer pal, Marty McGee, Kentucky correspondent for the Daily Racing Forum. You can find him at DRF McGee out on Twitter. And, of course, I'm still looking for another Cincinnati Reds game with him at some point down the line because we had such good fun 2 years ago out on the Give a Spit tour, the 30-30 tour. Early on, man, he got me going like I think we were like night 3 or no, it was night 6 of the tour, I believe it was, in Cincinnati with Marty down there in Keeneland and Churchill Downs and getting all that Kentucky horse racing in for you. We even have nonstop flights down there now. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are this week. And, of course, you can always get the breaking news happening first on your phone. It's our text service brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colossos will be here this Thursday, next Thursday on the eve of the Black Eyed Susan. Bringing it home for you from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. They also are sponsored by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You can go to Green Bay. You can go to Nashville. You can go to London with us on our Ravens road trips. It's all up under the road trips tab at WNST.net. You can also email me anytime. You can follow my journey along out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and we're always streaming live on Facebook and our Twitter and YouTube. So if you're subscribed to anything and you see live stream, that means I'm coming to get you, so come get us. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.